Now, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. So let me explain. First off, it's free. I'm not joking, you guys. The Anchor app, it is free to use. Second, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Now that's awesome, isn't it? Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, you guys, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and so many more platforms. Fourth, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum relationship. Now, is that awesome, you guys, or what? That's just terrific. And finally, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So I have another podcast with Anchor, and I'm just loving Anchor so much. I love it. It's so very easy to use, guys. So why don't you download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. What's up, you guys, and welcome to the official podcast of Damian Talks Education. So listen up. I am here to talk about all things education on my podcast. So get prepared for some realness and honesty of education as I walk you down through various of topics that's happening in the education world with some amazing guests, to sharing stories relating to education and so much more, because I got you covered with education. So join me on this journey of education with me. Guess what, you guys? It is the end of the week, and you know what that means. There's a new episode of Damian Talks Education. So, welcome to Damian Talks Education. I'm your host, Damian Anderson here. So, let me get started with today's topic to end out the week. Still talking about the topic of what's currently happening in the world. So, y'all join me. This episode, you're really going to enjoy this episode because I'm going to talk about lessons. I'm going to be giving out like 8 lessons for talking about race, racism, and racial justice. So this is going to be an important episode. So tune in. Do not go away. Tune in now. Stay with me. Listen. Okay, because I'm going to be giving y'all some lessons for talking about race, racism, and racial justice. So let me get started with it, all right? So as we strive, you guys, as we strive to improve conversations of, having these difficult conversations about race, racism, and racial justice in this country, the environment in which we're speaking seems to be constantly shifting, am I right? Yet these conversations that we are having are more important than ever. That's what I've been trying to say in the last couple of episodes. We have to have these important conversations with ourselves. We have to start it off with ourselves first, because like I mentioned in the last episode, if you don't have it, you have these conversations with yourself first, then how are you going to have a deeper knowledge of talking about the issues with other people and try to get on their same page? So we have to have these difficult conversations with ourselves first. That's what I believe in. You don't have to do what I'm telling you, but I'm giving y'all the facts here of what I believe in and what I know, because it starts with it all starts with you first, of opening up, of trying to have these difficult conversations with your families and with your friends. Okay, so we got to start it off. It all starts with you first. Okay, so they are more important than ever right now, as of today. Okay, now we have put together, I say we have put together, I have put together some advice on finding entry points based on research, experience, and the input of partners from around the country. Now, this is by no means a complete list, you guys, but it is a start. This is a starting point, just the beginning for moving forward, for moving these discussions forward, okay? Now, listen up, you guys. Please note that while there are many reasons to communicate with various of audience about racial justice issues, this memo focused on messaging with the primary goal of persuading to you guys toward action, to people going toward the action. Now, there are many times when people need to communicate their anger, their frustration, and pain to the world and to speak truth to the power. Okay? So doing this may not always be persuasive as you want it to be. But, that is also a powerful word. But that that obviously doesn't make it any less important than it does. Now, since we're considering persuasion a project goal in this memo, well, since I am, please consider the following advice through the lenses. Okay. Now, I have these for you guys. So listen as what I have here. Okay. Now, lessons for talking about race, racism, and racial justice. Now, I'm going to be talking about one, lead with shared values. You have justice, opportunities, community, ethical. Number two is to use the values as a bridge, not as a bypass. Number three, know the counter narratives. Number four, talk about the semantic obstacles to equal opportunities and equal justice. Number five, be rigorous, solutions orientated, and forward looking ahead. Number six, consider your audience and your goals. Number seven, be explicit about the different causes of racial versus social economic disparities. And finally, number eight is to describe how racial bias and discrimination hold us all back. Okay? So stick around to what I have to share. Whoa, okay? So number one is to lead with shared values. You have justice, opportunity, community, and equity. Now, starting with values that matter most to you and to your audience can help people to hear your message more clearly and more efficiently than dry facts or emotions. Okay, a radical would. Now, encouraging people to think about shared values encourage aspiration, hopeful thinking, and so much more. Now, when possible, this can be a better place to start when entering those tough conversations than with fear or anxiety. Now, here's a simple language, you guys, that I found. Okay, so here's simple one. To work for all of us, the people responsible for our justice system have to be resolute in their commitment to equal treatment and investigation based on evidence, not stereotype or bias. But too often, police departments use racial profiling, which is singling people out because of their race or accent, instead of based on evidence on wrongdoing. Now, that's against our national values. It endangers our young people, especially, and reduces public safety. Now, we need to ensure that law enforcement officials are held to the constitutional standards we value as Americans, protecting public safety and the rights of all. And that's sample one. So what did y'all think of that? Going to sample two. Now listen to this. We're a better country when we make sure everyone has a chance to meet his or her full potential. We say we're a country founded on the idols of opportunity and equality. And we have a real responsibility to live up to those values. Now, discrimination based on race is contrary to our values, and we need to do everything in our power to end it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Number two is to use values as a bridge, not a bypass. Now, when you start opening these conversations with shared values, it helps to emphasize society's role in affording a fair chance to everyone. But starting these conversations here does not mean avoiding discussions of race. We need to talk about this. Now, I suggest bridging from shared values to the roles of racial equity, inclusion, and fulfilling those values for all of us. Now, doing so can move your audience into a frame of mind that is more solution oriented and less mired and skeptical about the continued existence of discrimination or in our ability to do anything about it. Now here's a sample language. Listen to this. It's in our nation's interest to ensure that everyone enjoys full and equal opportunity, but that's not happening in our educational system today. It's not happening. It's not. Where children of color face overcrowded classrooms, uncertified teachers, and essential discipline for more often than their white peers. Exactly. Exactly. Now, if we don't attend to those inequalities while improving education for our children, then we will never become the nation that we aspire to be. Okay? So think about that. Think about that. Now, here's an example. And this was by a senator for Race Forward, and they told this to the NBC News. A beautiful thing about this country is its multiracial character. But right now, we have got diversity with a lot of segregation and equality and equity. I want to see a truly exclusive society. And I think we will always struggle as a country toward that. No post-racial society is possible or desirable, but every generation can make progress toward that goal. Okay. Number three is to know the counter narratives. Now, some things consistently emerge in conversation about race, particularly from those who do not want to talk about unequal opportunity or the existence of racism. Now, while we all probably feel like we know these narratives inside out, it's still important to examine them and particularly to watch how they evolve and change. Now, the point in doing this is not to argue, listen, is to not argue against each thing point by point, but to understand what stories are happening in people's heads when we try to start a productive conversation. A few common themes include the idea that racism is largely over or dying out over time. And then you have people of color are obsessed with race. Then you have alleging discrimin- blah, 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 blah. Then you have alleging discrimination is itself racist and diverse. Then you have claiming discrimination is playing the race card. Then you have hypocritical issues. Then you have civil rights or a crutch for those who lack merits or drive. Then you have, if we can address class inequalities, racial equality will take care of itself. Then you have racism will always be with us. So it's a waste of time to talk about it. Huh. Racism will always be with us. So it's a waste of time to talk about it. No, it's not a waste of time. I don't agree with that. It's not a waste of time of talking about race. We need to talk about racism. I want it to end, and so many people out here in the world want it to end as well. So it's not a how is it a waste of time of talking about it? I don't get that right there. How can it be a waste of time of talking about race, which it is a issue in our country, especially right now? It is. It is an issue. It's a big problem. So it's not a waste of time to talk about it. Continue on talking about it with your friends and your families and on the platforms. Continue on talking about it. Because I want it to end hopefully one of these days as well. Moving on to number 4. Talk about the systematic obstacles to equal opportunity and equal justice. Now, too often, our culture views social problems through an individual lens. What did a person do to deserve it? Deserve his or her specific position or their circumstances? But we know that history, the policies, the culture, and many other factors beyond individual choices have gotten us to where we are today. Now, when we're hoping to show the existence of discrimination or racism by pointing out racial unequal positions, now it's partially important to tell the full story that links cause, the history, and the effect, which is the outcome. Now, without this important link, you guys, some of your audience can walk away. They can walk away from believing that our healthcare, our criminal justice, or our educational system work fine, and therefore differing the outcomes is this because people of color are doing something wrong about it. Now here's a simple language. Listen to this. Most of us carry around explicit bias and unconscious stereotypes in our heads. Now it's part of being human. But when those biases go uninterrupted in our lives, they can cause real harm, like police officers shooting people of color who pose of no threat, or prosecutors, seeking shifting sentences for people of color charged with a crime, then white defenses accused of the same conduct. I'm sick of that right there. I'm sick of that right there. That's Now, ensuring that people in law enforcement do the right thing and that they are trained enough to recognize and overcome their bias is very essential to a system that upholds equal justice and keeps all of our communities safe. Now, here's an example from that simple language. The widely discussed phenomenon of driving while black illustrates the potential abuse of discretion by law enforcement. Now, a 2-year study of 13,566 officers indicated traffic stops in a Midwestern city revealed that minority drivers were stopped at a higher rate than whites, who were also searched for contraband at a higher rate than their white counterparts. Yes, officers were no more likely to find contraband on minorities motorcyclists than white motorcyclists. Okay, this was from the Sentencing Project publication, Reducing Racial Disparities in the Criminal Justice System, a manual for policymakers. And here's another example from the Julian Brave Noise Cat, Native Issues Fellow at the Huffington Post. Native Americans and Alaska Natives are often unable to vote because there are no polluting places anywhere. The polls. There are no polluting places anywhere near them. Now, some communities, such as the Duck Valley Reservation in Nevada and the Gush Hole Reservation in Utah, are located more than 100 miles from the nearest polluted places. Okay, so think about that. As I'm talking about this, think about that. Number 5, almost done. Be rigorous, solution-oriented, and forward-looking. So let me explain this into more depth. After laying the groundwork for how the problem has developed right now, it's key to move quickly to solutions. Now, some people who understand that unequal opportunity exists, they also believe that nothing can be done about it, leading to compassion fatigue and inaction. Wherever possible, link a description of the problem to a clear, positive solution in action, and point out who was responsible for taking that action. Okay. Now here's a sample. Here is another simple language for you guys. I got actually 2 for you guys, and then underneath it I got an example of it. So pay attention. Sample 1. Asian Americans often face partially step obstacles to needed health care because of language and cultural barriers, as well as limited insurance coverage. Now our legislations can knock down these barriers by putting policies in place that train our health professionals, provide English language learning programs, and organize community health centers. Sample 2, the Department of Justice, Congress, local and state legislators, and prosecutioner's office should ensure that there is fairness in the prosecutioner decision-making process by requiring routine implemented bias training for prosecutors, routine review of data metrics to expose and address racial inequalities, and the incorporation of racial impact review in performance review for individual prosecutors. Now, DOJ should issue guidance to prosecutors on reducing the impact of implemented bias in prosecution. Now, here is an example of it. This is from the BYB. This is from the BYP 100 Agenda to Keep Us Safe website. Organizing to achieve public policy change is one major aspect of our larger mission to create freedom and justice for all Black people. Now, their aim is to equip young people with a clear set of public policy goals to organize towards and win in their local communities. Okay. Number 6 is to the next. Number 6, consider your audience and your goals. Now, in any communication persuasive strategies, we should start with who we're trying to reach out and what we want them to do in order for whatever you're trying to do. Now, engaging on topics around race, racism, and racial justice, this is particularly important. And we all know that people throughout the country are in a very different place when it comes to their understanding of racial justice issues. Am I right? I am right. Now, in strategizing about your audience, the goal should be to both energize the base and persuade, the undecided. Now, here's a few questions to consider, okay? Here are a few questions to consider. Who are you hoping to influence with whatever you're trying to reach? Who are you hoping to influence? Narrowing down your target audience helps to refine your strategies, okay? Another question is, what do you want them to do? What do you want your audience to do? Okay? Determine the appropriate action for your audience and strategy. Sometimes you may have direct access to decision makers and are working to change their minds. But other times you may have access to other people who influence the decision makers. Okay. The next question is, what do you know about their current thinking? What are they thinking about? Well, from public opinion research, social media scans, their own words, and etc. So think about that. Another question. What do you want to change about that? What do you want to change about the topic that you are saying, that you are discussing with your audience? Well, consider the change in thinking that needs to happen consider the change in thinking that needs to happen to cause the action to occur. Okay? And the last question I have is, who do they listen to? Who are they listening to? What news sources, etc. Who are they listening to? Well, identify the media they consume and the people who are likely to influence their thinking. Now, this may be an opportunity to reach out to allies to serve as spokespeople if they might carry more weight with certain audience. Okay? Now, number 7, you guys, I'm almost finished. Second to last. Number 7 is be explicit about the different causes of racial versus social economic disparities. Now, we need to make a cause that racism causes different problems than poverty, high crime neighborhoods, or challenge educational systems do. And yeah, I was about to mention something, but I totally forgot, but it may come back up. But anyways, they are interrelated, aren't they? To be sure, but study after study, as well as many people's live experience, show that even after adjusting for social economic factors, racial inequities persist. Now, here's an example from talking about, if that doesn't make sense for what I was talking about, here's the example. An African American pregnant woman or 2 to 3, let me start this over again, you guys. An African American pregnant woman are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience premature birth and 3 times more likely to give birth to a low birth weight infant. This disparity persists even after controlling for factors such as low income, low education, and alcohol and tobacco use. Now, to explain these persistent differences, researchers now say that racism likely serves as a source of chronic stress, negatively affecting the body's hormonal levels, which can increase the likelihood of premature birth and low birth weights. Okay. Um, and that was from the American Journal of Public Health article. Very low, very low birth weights in African American infants. The role of material exposure to interpersonal racial discrimination. Now, the final of this lesson, talking about race, racism, and racial justice, is 8. Describe how racial bias and discriminations hold us all back. In addition to showing how discrimination and unequal opportunity harm people of color, it's important to explain how systematic bias affect all of us and prevent us from achieving your full potential as a country. Now, we can never truly become a land of opportunity while we allow racial inequities to persist, keep on going on. And ensuring equal opportunity for all is in our shared economic and social interests. Now, in fact, 8 in 10 people, 8 in 10 Americans believe that they believe that society functions better when all groups have an equal chance in life. Okay. Now, research also shows that people are more likely to acknowledge that discrimination against other groups is a problem now, and more likely to want to do something about it if they themselves have experienced it. Okay. Now, most people have at some point felt on the outside or that they were unfairly excluded from something. And about 6 in 10 reports that they have experienced discrimination based on race, economic status, their gender, sexual orientation, religion's belief, or accent. Now, reminding people of this feeling can help them think about what racism and oppression really means for others as well as themselves. Now, here's a simple language, and then I have some examples. Virtually all of us have been part of a family with kids. Some are single parents, and many of us will face disabilities as we age. Now, many of those circumstances lead to being treated differently, maybe in finding housing, looking for a job, getting an education, etc., so on and so on. We need strong laws that knock down the barriers and substitute barriers to equal access that any of us might face in our lives. Now, if you didn't get what I was just saying here are some examples. Discrimination isn't just an insult to our most basic notions of fairness. It also costs us money. It also costs us money because those who are discriminated against are unable to make the best use of their talents. Now, this not only hurts them, but it hurts us all as Americans, as some of our best and brightest players are in Excel and sideline unable to make their full contribution to our economy. And that is from Mr. David, the economic reporter in Time magazine. Here's another example. Racial inclusion and income inequalities are key factors driving regional economic growth and are possibly associated with growth in your employment, the output, um, your productivity, how you work, and per capita income. According to an analyst of 118 metro um, metropolitan regions. Now, regions that become more equitable in the 1900s with reductions in racial segregation, income disparities, or concentrated poverty experienced greater economic growth as measured by increased per capita income. And that was from the Policy Link publication, All in Nation. Now, I'm not just through just yet. Um, we're moving to applying the lessons. So VPSA, which is value, problem, solution, and action. Now, one useful approach to trying these lessons together is to structure communication around value, the problem, the solution, and the action, meaning that each message contains these four key components. Values, why the audience should care about it, and how they will connect the issue for themselves. Then you have the problem, which frames as a threat to the shared values we have just, invoked. I have just invoked. We have just invoked. Then you have the solution, which is stating what you're for, stating what you are, against, what you are for. And then you have the action, which is a concrete ask of the audience to ensure engagement and movement. So here's an example of value of all of these. So for the value is to work for all of us. Our justice system depends on equal treatment and investigations based on evidence, not stereotypes or bias. Then you have problem. But many communities continue to experience racial profiling, where members are singled out only because of what they look like. Now, in one Maryland study that I found, 17.5% of motorcyclists, I was talking about that a little earlier, speeding on a parkway were African American, and 74.7% were white. Yet, over 70% of the drivers whom police stop and search were Black, and at least one trooper searched only for the African American. Now, officers were no more likely to find contraband on Black motorcyclists than white motorcyclists. Now, these practices erode community trust in police and make the goal of true community safety more difficult to achieve. Then you move on to the solution. We need shared data on police interaction. Yes, we do. With the public that shows who police are stopping, arresting, and most importantly, why. I want that to happen. Now, these kinds of data encourage the transparency and trust, and it helps the police strategies on how to improve their work, that they are supposed to be protecting us and not attacking us. And they also help communities get a clear picture of police interaction in the community. I like that right there. We need to do that. And then you have action. So urge your local police department to join police from around the country and participate in these important shared databases. Now I'm moving on to the examples of the four components, starting with value. We're a better country when we make sure everyone has a chance to meet his or her potential. I talked about that a little earlier, and I believe in the last episode. We say we're a country founded on the ideals of opportunities and equality, and we have a real responsibility to live up to those values. Now, racism is a particular affront to our values, and we need to do something to end it. Problem. Now moving on to the problem. Sorry guys, now we're moving on to the problem. Yes, we know that racism, my bad. Now moving on to the problem, I just lost my word. Yes, we know that racism persists and that its effects can be devastating. For instance, I talked about this earlier a few minutes ago. African American pregnant women are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience premature birth and 3 times more likely to give birth to a low birth weight infant. And this disparity persists even after controlling for factors such as low income, low education, and alcohol and tobacco use. Now, to explain these persistent differences, researchers now say then it's likely the chronic stress of racism that negatively affects the body hormones level, increase the likelihood of premature birth and low birth weights. I'm almost finished, you guys. I'm almost finished. Y'all probably getting bored. I'm sorry. But these are important information. Moving on to the solution. We all have a responsibility to examine the causes and effects of racism in our country. We have to educate ourselves. Yes, we you guys, you don't understand. We have to listen what I'm saying here. We have to I'm saying we, that's me, all of us, not just me, not just one person, not to a white person. We as Americans, we have to educate ourselves and learn how to talk about these issues with those around us. Like I said earlier, if you don't know what you're talking about, how can you explain it when you're trying to have a deeper conversation with another person? How can you do that if you don't know what you're talking about? You need to educate yourself. Educate yourself first before you educate others. That's very important right there. That's really important, you guys. Educate yourself before you try to educate someone else who maybe already knows, and then you're just giving out false information. Honey, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about. So educate yourself first. Now, while we have made some important progress in decreasing discrimination and racism, we can't pretend we have moved beyond it completely. No, no, no. We cannot pretend because it's real. It's real. Don't pretend like it's completely gone. It's beyond gone. No, it's not gone. It's still here. And then you have action. The example of action. Join a racial justice campaign you. Okay. Now, moving on to the examples of these 4 components, and then I'm through, you guys. I'm through. Okay. So starting with value. As Americans, we believe in treating everybody fairly, regardless of what they look like or where their ancestors come from. That's the example of value. Now, here's an example of problem. But what we believe consistently and what we feel and do un, unconstantly can be two very different things, and despite our best attempts to rid ourselves of sorry guys, our best attempts to rid ourselves of prejudice and stereotypes. We all have them. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. I have got my sister over here. That's sorry. Now it just depends how conscious they are. Now all of us today know people of different race and ethnicities. We know people like that. We should all do, and we usually treat each other respectfully and joke around together at work. But for the most of us, listen what I'm saying here. But for the most of us, Americans of all color, the subtle or not so subtle attitudes of our parents or grandparents who grew up in a different time are still with us. Even if we are constantly rejected them, if we reject them out of our lives, because they are important to learn from. Example of a solution is personally look forward to the day when we can all see past color, all of us, white and black and brown and Asian and Hispanics, Latinos, all of us. We need to look for one of these days. We're gonna look past all of this. And we're gonna treat each other right. Because what we're doing right now, we are tearing each other down. We are tearing down black people. You guys are tearing down us, black people, right now. And there needs to be something done about this. There needs to be change happening. And like I keep on mentioning, I'm sick of it. I want racism to end because one of these days we are going to love one another and be kind to one another. Because like I mentioned a couple episodes back, Jesus loves all of us. So why can't we love everyone and treat each other fairly and be kind to each other? One of these days it's going to happen. I believe it. One of these days we're going to look past it of all race, Hispanics, brown, white, Latinos, all of it. We're going to look past it and treat each other right. But right now, y'all are tearing down the black people, the black community. We need to lift each other up. Now, to do that, to look past this, we all have to be aware. You all have to be aware. You have to, listen to what I'm saying. You have to be aware of what's going on in your heads right now. What can you do about it? How can you help? How can you get involved? And how that collective bias has shaped our history and where we are right now. Okay? So think about that. Think about it. What are you doing right now or trying to help in this country right now? Are you trying to get involved? Are you signing petitions? What are you doing? If you're just sitting back, if you are just sitting back, you're not doing nothing, you're not helping. So don't say you're helping us because you're not, because you're sitting back. And this is like my favorite corner now, you guys. You are sitting back, just sitting here, you're not doing nothing, you're not helping. So don't say that you are helping us when you are not. So don't say it. Don't mention it at all to us because we don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it. So, no. And finally, we have the action, which is, but we're just not there yet. So let's make it a priority to get there. Okay? It all starts, you guys. Ooh, I'm a little dark. It all starts with us. We are the first step of making the change happen. Okay? So please Make the changes now into your lives, into your communities. Help out any way that you can. It's just, I can't, you guys, stress this enough. So help out, help, help out. Okay. So that is this episode right here. Um, so thank you guys for joining and tuning in to hear what I have to say. Lessons of talking about race, racism, and racial justice, because those things are very important. And we have to, again, I'm gonna keep on saying this, you guys, because it is true. We have to have these difficult conversations with ourselves. Start with yourself first. Start having a conversation with yourself first before you try to with anybody else. And get educated about it. Please get educated about it, because if you want to help others and you're not educated about it, how can you help them and other people around you when you are not educated about it? You're not passionate about it. Come on now. If you want to do the work, do it right. Educate yourself, people. So that's all. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to mention. I'm just leaving. I'm just going to leave it to you guys of how you should begin the action, of how you want to be the change for this world, of how you want change to happen now. So it's all up to you guys. It's not all up to me to do all the work. I can't do all the work for you. I can't. It all starts with you and the people that you vote for, your officials. Okay? So that's all I have to say. So make sure you guys subscribe and follow to Damian Talks Education wherever you stream your podcast at. Available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Radio Public, Breaker, Pocket Cast, lots more, many platforms, and on YouTube. And I forgot to mention this on the last episode, but make sure you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel, Damian Talks Education, for this video versions episodes, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss the episode, which drops every Fridays. So do that. And you guys make sure you follow Damian Talks Education on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Damian Talks EDU, and on Facebook at Damian Talks Education or EDU. It's still the same thing. You still, where there are full episodes. I'm trying to upload full episodes on there for you guys that like to watch videos on Facebook. And then also all of the posts that I will be posting on there and interacting with you guys, okay? Because I want to hear from you. Now, if you guys have any questions, you guys, that you want to ask me, any stories that you want to share with me, or a person, anybody, you guys, that you want me to interview, please let me know, you guys. Please let me know by any forms of way. You can direct message me on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook at Damian Talks EDU. You can email me at educationthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. That is still the same. I haven't changed it yet. So do that. So yeah, I'll be starting back interviewing guests on my podcast toward the end of September or in October. So if you have anyone in mind that you would like, if you would like to come on my show, please let me know. Any of my old classmates, you want to come on my show, please let me know. I would love to hear from you guys and see how you are doing. And I would love to hear from my listeners, because you are very important to me. I believe I'm thinking about doing a segment on you guys, from hearing from you guys. I want to chat with you guys and see how are you doing. I want to interact with you guys, and that would be so much fun to get to know you better, and y'all to get to know me better as well. So I'm thinking about doing that probably in the next coming of months or weeks. I'm thinking about doing that. So keep a lookout for that, my listeners. I want to hear from you guys. I want y'all to chat with me. I want to chat with you guys as well. And then also, you guys, leave a review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts because I'll be reading all your comments of how much you love the show or you hate it or is there something wrong with it. Send it all in. Send it all in because I will be reading every single one of your comments. So do that. And I believe that's it. That's all I have to announce. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, listening, watching. I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. And I will see y'all guys back on another episode of Damian Talks Education very soon. So until then, take care of yourself, be safe, and to speak up, open up. Do not be silent anymore. I'll see you guys back for Damian Talks Education. Take care. Hello, everyone. Damian Anderson here. If you have a question, concerns about Damian Talks Education, stories to share with me, any feedback to share, reactions to the topics that I talk about, jokes to tell, or someone you will like for me to interview, please let me know by direct messaging me on Instagram and Twitter at Damian Talks EDU, on Facebook at Damian Talks Education. You can email me at educationthoughtspodcast@gmail.com or send in a voice message to me by going to anchor.fm/Damian Talks Education and make sure you click on the message tab to where you can record your questions into me. Thanks so much.